Welcome back to the Matt Return Podcast. I'm your co-host, Zach Allen.
And I'm Kaleb Boyer.
And we're back. I think it's been a couple weeks. Or no, we were here last week. It was 2 weeks before that. But we actually had an interesting dual meet for once on Sunday. Penn State beat Nebraska 22-13. They were down at halftime, though. And, I think it's something you and I have both been waiting for as reporters to report on kind of a close dual meet for once. So just to kick it off here, I mean, what were your main takeaways from Penn State's win against Nebraska?
Well, obviously you had that upset at 125. That was a big deal. First time this season that Braden's looked completely out of the water.
Yeah.
He got, I think it was 11-3.
Yeah.
So he got major decision. And then obviously Nagel was not good to go. He was apparently sick. So all of a sudden Penn State drops 3 of their first 5. And that Levi Haynes match ended up being at the time it was really big. I know Penn State won by, 9 points. So even if they had dropped that, they could have still won. But I just thought it was an actually entertaining duel. And I don't want to say wrestling's always entertaining in the individual matchups. But as a duel, we talked about this last week with duels are not as entertaining. This was a very entertaining duel. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think I was saying to one of you guys that might have been my favorite dual meet I've covered in the 3 years I've been on the beat so far. I'd have to go back and think, but definitely this season that was easily the best one, not only for the wrestling but for the crowd. I think that was the most rowdy I've seen the student section be all season. And then at one point I saw Nebraska's coach even get up and point in the stands at a Penn State fan. So it was just, I feel like that's what college wrestling is all about. And I remember Cale Sanderson said that's why they added music, so it wasn't silent. It was barely ever silent in there. Maybe after or during Braden's match was the only time. But Rec Hall was rocking, and I think my personal biggest takeaway was Penn State's back half of the lineup once again is just dominant. And, they have Bo Bartlett and Levi are number one, some up-and-comers like Braden and Tyler. But, Penn State's really been able to hang their hat on the back half of the lineup really since Cale Sanderson's been hired here. If you look at their national champions, the majority of them have been on the back half of the lineup. But, you have the Nick Lees and the Zane Rutherford and Jason Nolfs that have had success in the front half. But it's like murderer's row back there. And I just think it's always amazing to see that. To me, it's wow, it kind of almost doesn't matter what happens in the front half. That's an exaggeration, but they can easily win all 5 matches on the back half almost every time. I think with the exception of maybe 184 pounds, and we saw that again. But moving on, Penn State facing Edinboro on Sunday might have the chance of being an even better match. I'm just kidding. I don't even think we really have to talk about this much at all. I just think it's going to be a blowout, if not a shutout.
Yeah, they're 2-11. There's not much to talk about. They didn't even bother putting the individual wrestlers' records. They're pretty much all freshmen going for them. So I'd be very surprised if they take a match.
Yeah, I mean, it might be an opportunity to see what the future looks like for the Nittany Lions a little bit. But I think with that in mind, just how much of not a competition it's going to be this weekend, I think we can finally start looking toward the Big Ten tournament. I know it's once it turned February, I feel like that's when maybe Cale Sanderson's focus really focuses towards March. He always tends to look towards there anyway. But with the Big Ten tournament coming up in just a couple weeks now, other than the number one guys that Penn State has, who do you think could take home a Big Ten title?
I know we talked about an obvious guy on the pod, or before the pod, excuse me, that could definitely do it, who's not in the number one slot for the Nittany Lions. But I would probably have to go with Truax as like kind of a sleeper pick, just because I know he lost to Pinto this past weekend. But if he gets to his offense a little earlier, like he finally did in the third, I definitely think he could beat him. Like I would not expect it. I would not go out there and be like, oh, he's gonna beat him. But as like a dark horse candidate, it's not
Yeah.
a bad pick. I don't think.
No, and that match was close. He nearly had the comeback at the very end there.
Yeah, I think he lost
It
by
was like
two or
eight
three.
to 9-6, 8-6.
Yep, 8-6.
So
So
yeah, I don't think that's a bad call at all. And I know Kale has been saying, well, he'll wrestle the best when he needs it, which I mean, I'm sure he'd say about any of his wrestlers. But who knows? I definitely think he could be a dark horse candidate. But I think the obvious answer that you mentioned before is Mitchell Messenbrink. He's looked phenomenal all season, and when he was down last week against Antrell Taylor, he was like when he escaped that first time, he was clapping his hands at the middle of the mat and pumping up Rec Hall. He's just and not to mention he's a U20 world champion. That always helps. But when you look at the conference, the only guy that's ranked higher than him is Dean Hamady from Wisconsin, and obviously they haven't wrestled yet. But with just the way his season has been, it's been almost. I mean, on the record, it's been almost flawless. He's only been taken down a couple times. He's undefeated. I really don't see anyone stopping him. So that's obviously the obvious answer. But do you think some of the younger guys like Kasak or Braden Davis could make a run here? I mean, I know 125 pounds is kind of loaded with Big Ten talent, but do you think there's any possibility of that happening?
I definitely think they're both possible. Both of those kids, they've kind of gone through a patch lately where they're wrestling guys who are like top 10 in their weight, and they're dropping these matches. But I don't know if I see a Big Ten title this year for either of them. Maybe more so Braden than Tyler. Sorry, I just blanked on his name for a second. But I definitely think there's a possibility, or there's a path for both of them.
Yeah, I don't. Kasak did pretty well against the number one wrestler in his weight class on Sunday. But the more experience, the better. And yeah, like you said, Braden's definitely had a little rough patch here. Of course, both opponents have been top 10 caliber guys, but still, I think that major decision on Sunday was surprising. Obviously, it wasn't like he gave up 4 takedowns. It was the one takedown that came with some near fall points at the end. But yeah, I just I don't know about this season. I definitely think next season going forward, they could, like I said, after what I said earlier, how the back half of the lineup has been so stacked. I think they could really bring some power to the front half of the lineup. So yeah, I think definitely in future years those two guys could, and definitely I think definitely that they will be Big Ten champions before they leave college. But I guess next we'll look further even more to the NCAA championships, which also aren't that far out. I actually think they start 1 month from today. If it's the
Yep, that
21st
sounds right.
today. Yeah, it is the 21st today. So it's 1 month from today. They'll be in Kansas City wrestling. And I guess I'll just pose the same question kind of in a little different format. Um, Instead of who do you think is a dark horse to win the whole thing, that's kind of a hard pick to make. But what about All Americans?
Are you asking me like how many or who specifically?
You can do both. How many and who are they?
Okay, so I would say they're probably going to All American 9. Uh,
Who's the exception?
The exception I think is going to be Nagao. I actually think so.
Why's that?
I mean, he's just kind of like Braden. He's hit a really rough patch, and he's sick this past weekend. He has what is he? 0-4 against top 10 opponents, I believe. Yep, 0-4. He has not beaten a guy in the top 10, and he's faced 4 guys this year, including, I believe it was Crookham, Ragusin, Shaver, and the Ohio State kids. So,
Buzakis.
yeah.
So do you think the Gau's, he obviously lost to Roman Bravo Young last year in the Big Tens. Do you think he's going to even get to the Big Ten final
If I had to
this
bet
year?
money on it, I'd probably say no. I wouldn't be completely shocked if he did it for the Big Tens, but for nationals, I just do not see it.
So what do you expect? Like a blood round knockout type of deal?
Yeah, like he makes the blood round. Maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't. But if I had to bet money on it, I'd probably say not.
Yeah, and I think the sickness definitely doesn't help. Obviously, it'll probably pass by then, but who knows? Carter's been sick for a while here.
Yeah, it took him 3 weeks to get over it. So you're
Yeah,
talking 3 weeks from now. I mean, that's 1 week before nationals.
yeah, but he could easily be back, and I think Kale said on Tuesday they plan on him to be back. Actually, now that I think about it, so but yeah, that sickness has just been lingering around that locker room for since January, and it's almost March now.
Yeah, we talked about it. Kasak missed time. Carter missed time. Um, Obviously now Nagao missed time. I'm trying to think. Somebody else missed time. Brooks was sick but wrestled, and then Greg also missed one match.
Yeah, he was the late scratch against Rutgers.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think we'll definitely have more answers after the Big Ten tournament about who can place where at the national tournament. I think probably everybody in Penn State's lineup is certainly capable of pulling it off. It's just whether they will or not, and based on the trends that we've seen, like you said, Nagao going 0-4 against top 10 guys is definitely not a hopeful metric here as the postseason is upon us. I can't believe it already. But yeah, that's all from us for this week. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Matt Return podcast. But for now, I'm your co-host, Zach Allen.
And I'm Kaleb Boyer.
Peace.